sterile wealthy millionaire enters a contract marriage, only to discover she's his one true love. And as Aaliyah slipped the ring on her finger, watching the stranger who was now her husband walk toward the door, she wondered exactly how much of herself she'd just sold, and if she would ever get it back. Have you ever stood at a crossroads where the right choice and the necessary choice weren't the same? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. She signed her name on the final line of the marriage contract, trading her freedom for $5 million and a wedding ring that weighed heavier than the debt crushing her shoulders. Aaliyah Brooks watched the ink dry beside the bold signature of Michael Hawthorne, billionaire, stranger, and as of this moment, her husband. The pen felt cool against her fingers, expensive and foreign, just like everything else in this gleaming office with its marble floors and crystal decorations that made even the air feel like it cost money to breathe. The terms are straightforward, the attorney said, sliding the documents into a leather portfolio. You maintain the appearance of a loving marriage for 2 years. You attend necessary events. You live in Mr. Hawthorne's residence. Upon completion, you receive the remainder of your payment and a clean divorce. Aaliyah glanced at her new husband. His jaw remained tight, eyes forward, those cold blue irises that hadn't truly looked at her during the entire meeting. His tailored suit probably cost more than her car, his watch more than her entire nursing school education. The education that left her drowning in student loans while her mother's medical bills piled higher each month. Your debts will be cleared by tomorrow morning. Michael finally spoke, his voice deep and controlled. The first payment will be transferred immediately. Her mother's face flashed in her mind. Tired eyes, brave smile, refusing to admit how much pain she was in because treatments cost too much. One signature for her mother's life. One signature for freedom from debt. Was it really such a terrible exchange? The lawyer departed, leaving them alone in the vast conference room. Michael finally turned to her, his expression unreadable as he removed a small box from his pocket. The ring inside caught the light, platinum band, diamond center stone flanked by sapphires. For appearances, he explained, taking her hand. His fingers brushed against hers as he slid the ring into place. Something electric and unexpected shot through her skin at the contact. His eyes flickered up to meet hers, a brief flash of surprise crossing his features before the mask returned. The car will pick you up tomorrow morning, he said, stepping back and straightening his tie. Pack for a new life, Mrs. Hawthorne. The name felt foreign on her skin, like clothes that didn't belong to her, but the check he slid across the table was real enough to make her hands tremble. Have you ever stood at a crossroads where the right choice and the necessary choice weren't the same? Where you had to decide between your principles and someone you love? Tell me in the comments what choice you would have made in Aaliyah's position. Because sometimes the hardest decisions come when we're backed against a wall with no good options. Sometimes we sell pieces of ourselves, believing we'll buy them back later. Sometimes we sign contracts thinking our hearts are safe because they weren't included in the terms. But hearts don't read legal documents. And as Aaliyah slipped the ring on her finger, watching the stranger who was now her husband walk toward the door, she wondered exactly how much of herself she'd just sold, and if she would ever get it back. The mansion sprawled across 3 acres of Connecticut snow, as white, pristine, and emotionally frigid as the man who owned it. Aaliyah pressed her forehead against the car window as they approached through wrought iron gates, taking in the colonial columns and endless windows that gleamed in winter sunlight. This would be her cage for the next 2 years. A beautiful, luxurious cage, but a cage nonetheless. We have staff, Michael explained as the car crunched to a stop on the circular driveway. A housekeeper, groundskeeper, and cook. They live in the guest house and maintain discretion. Of course they did. Everyone in Michael Hawthorne's life signed confidentiality agreements, herself included. Page 6 of the contract specifically outlined what she could and couldn't say about their arrangement. The grand foyer echoed with their footsteps, marble floors, sweeping staircase, artwork that probably cost more than her entire life. A woman in a crisp uniform appeared, introduced as Mrs. Porter, the housekeeper. Her eyes assessed Aaliyah with practiced neutrality that didn't quite hide her curiosity. "I've prepared the East Wing Master Suite for Mrs. Hawthorne," she announced. "Thank you," Michael replied, not bothering to correct the title that was legally accurate but practically false. "We'll dine at 7. Aaliyah's suite was larger than her entire apartment. The bathroom alone could fit her previous bedroom. She ran her fingers over Egyptian cotton sheets, stared at the walk-in closet already filled with clothing in her size, and fought the urge to laugh at the absurdity of it all. By 7, she'd showered and changed into one of the dresses provided. A simple black number that fit perfectly. Too perfectly. The thought of Michael estimating her measurements sent an unexpected warmth across her skin. The dining room stretched before her like a museum exhibit of wealth. Chandeliers dripped crystal tears above a table long enough to seat 20, yet set for only 2, each place setting 12 feet apart, the distance a perfect metaphor for their arrangement. Michael already sat at the head, watching her approach. His eyes lingered on her a moment too long, something flickering behind them before he returned to his wine glass. "The dress suits you. Your stylist has good taste. I chose them myself." The confession hung in the air between them, oddly intimate. Throughout dinner, she felt his gaze when he thought she wasn't looking. The weight of it raised goosebumps along her neck. She caught herself watching his hands, strong, precise as they cut into his steak, elegant as they lifted his wine glass. The same hands that had slid a ring onto her finger just yesterday. "Your room is in the East Wing," he stated between sips of bourbon. "Mine is in the West. Let's keep it that way." Have you ever felt completely out of place, like you stepped into someone else's life? Drop a heart if you know that feeling. That night, lying in sheets worth more than her old apartment's rent, she heard his footsteps pause outside her door. The handle turned slightly, then stopped. Seconds stretched into forever before the footsteps retreated, leaving her breathless with something she refused to name as disappointment. She wore borrowed diamonds to a room full of wolves. Wolves in designer suits who smelled the scent of her ordinary blood the moment she walked in. The Riverside Club ballroom glittered with old money and new gossip, champagne flutes catching light like tiny beacons warning, "Outsider, outsider, outsider." Aaliyah gripped her clutch tighter, forcing her spine straight as whispers followed their entrance. Michael's hand rested at the small of her back, his touch feather-light, yet somehow burning through the fabric of her gown. "Smile," he murmured, leaning close enough that his breath warmed her ear. "They're watching." Of course they were watching. The elusive Michael Hawthorne had shocked Manhattan society with a surprise marriage to an unknown nurse. The story had exploded across business pages and gossip columns alike. Who was she? Where had she come from? How had she captured the uncapturable bachelor? If only they knew the truth. Michael, a silver-haired woman, approached, air-kissing near his cheek. "You've been hiding your bride from us." "Catherine," he nodded. "This is Aaliyah." The woman's eyes performed a practiced assessment, taking in Aaliyah's dress, jewelry, posture, calculating her worth, and finding it lacking. "How?" "Unexpected," she smiled with teeth too white and sharp. "Where did you two meet again?" "Hospital charity gala," Michael answered smoothly, his grip on Aaliyah's waist tightening. Aaliyah was speaking about community healthcare initiatives. She quite literally took my breath away. The lie rolled off his tongue with such ease that Aaliyah almost believed it herself. Throughout the evening, she endured similar interactions, polite smiles concealing judgment, questions loaded like weapons. Michael remained beside her, his presence both shield and shackle. When a venture capitalist's gaze lingered too long on her décolletage, Michael's fingers pressed possessively against her hip, pulling her closer. "Dance with me," he commanded rather than asked as the orchestra began a waltz. On the dance floor, his hands spread wide across her back, warm and steady. Their bodies moved closer than necessary, his thigh occasionally pressing between hers as they turned. The choreographed intimacy felt dangerous, like playing with matches while standing in gasoline. "You don't have to impress them," he whispered against her ear, close enough that his breath disturbed the curls at her temple. "They need to impress you." Something shifted in her chest at his words. a crack in the narrative she'd constructed about him, about this arrangement, about her place in this world of wealth and power. When have you felt like an outsider looking in? How did you handle the judgment? Share your experience below. The camera flash caught them off guard, his lips brushing her temple, her eyes closed in what looked like bliss. By morning, their photo would splash across page 6 with a headline neither was prepared for. Hawthorne finds love at last. Neither mentioned how convincing the lie had looked. He built walls higher than his skyscrapers, but she discovered the first hairline crack the morning she found him staring at her mother's photograph. Rain lashed against floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the manicured gardens into blurred patches of green and gray, a perfect mirror to the blurring boundaries between their carefully negotiated roles. 3 weeks into their arrangement, and already the lines were smudging like wet ink. Aaliyah hadn't meant to intrude. She'd come to the library seeking escape from the emptiness of her suite, only to find Michael already there, holding the silver frame that normally sat on her dresser. "She has your smile," he said without looking up, thumb tracing the edge of the photograph where her mother stood outside their Oakland apartment, arm wrapped around Aaliyah at her nursing school graduation. "She's why I'm here." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight release of the perpetual tension in his jaw. "My mother died when I was 8, he offered unexpectedly. "Cancer. My father remarried within a year." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither had planned to build. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." Their marriage was a business merger anyway. My father needed her family connections. She needed his money. A bitter smile touched his lips. "I swore I'd never repeat their mistake." The irony hung between them, unacknowledged and dangerous. Aaliyah moved closer, drawn by this glimpse behind the mask. "Yet here we are," he echoed, finally looking up. "Though our arrangement is at least honest about its purpose." A door opened somewhere in the house, Mrs. Porter arriving for the day. The moment shattered, Michael's walls reassembling brick by brick. Later that afternoon, Aaliyah turned the corner to find him emerging from the master bathroom, water droplets racing down the defined planes of his chest, disappearing beneath the towel hung dangerously low on his hips. Their eyes locked for 3 heartbeats, too long, before she mumbled an apology and retreated. But the image burned itself into her memory, not just his physical form, impressive as it was, but the startled vulnerability in his eyes. For that brief moment, he hadn't been the billionaire businessman with the calculated plan. He'd been simply a man caught unguarded. What's the moment you realize someone wasn't who you thought they were? The instant everything changed. Tag someone who surprised you this way. That evening, he joined her on the veranda despite the lingering chill from the rain. They sat in silence watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, neither acknowledging how the distance between their chairs had somehow decreased since the first week. "My father married my mother for her family connections," he said, voice distant as he stared into the gathering dusk. "I swore I'd never repeat their mistake." The irony hung between them, unacknowledged and dangerous. And somewhere beneath the confusion and contract and calculated distance, Aaliyah felt something shift, like tectonic plates moving imperceptibly beneath the surface, promising eventual earthquakes. Their first kiss wasn't in the contract. A momentary lapse of reason at a charity gala that left lipstick on his collar and questions neither could answer. The Metropolitan Museum transformed for the annual spring fundraiser. Marble halls draped in silk, artwork watching silently as New York's elite performed their social rituals beneath chandeliers that dripped light like liquid gold. String quartet notes floated through candlelit air as hundreds of eyes tracked their movement across the ballroom floor. Judgment and curiosity a tangible weight on her borrowed Marchesa gown. 6 weeks into their marriage, and they perfected the art of public affection. His hand at the small of her back, her smile tilting up at him at precisely the right moments. Their bodies maintaining calculated proximity that suggested intimacy without crossing invisible lines. Until James Whitfield approached. "Michael," the man drawled, champagne sloshing dangerously close to the rim of his flute. Fascinating business move, this marriage of yours. Michael's posture stiffened beside her. James, tell me, Whitfield continued, gaze sliding to Aaliyah with undisguised assessment. How does a nurse from? Where was it again? Oakland, catch Manhattan's most eligible bachelor. Remarkable coincidence. You meeting right before the trust deadline. The implication hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. Actually, Aaliyah countered, finding her voice. We met when Michael funded the community clinic where I worked, long before any trust was mentioned. Another lie, another strand in the web they were weaving. Is that so? Whitfield's smile didn't reach his eyes. Strange no one saw you together until the announcement, almost like it appeared out of thin air. Michael's hand at her waist pulled her closer. Perhaps you're not as observant as you believe, James. Perhaps. Or perhaps this is the most convenient relationship since. Darling, Michael interrupted, turning to Aaliyah, I believe they're playing our song. Before she could register his intent, his lips claimed hers. The kiss began as performance, a strategic move to silence suspicion. His mouth pressed against hers with practiced precision, one hand cupping her cheek while the other remained properly at her waist. A convincing display for onlookers. Then something shifted. His lips, firm yet unexpectedly gentle, grew more insistent when she gasped against his mouth. The hand at her waist tightened, drawing her body flush against his. What started as calculation dissolved into something raw and unscripted. His tongue tracing the seam of her lips, her fingers clutching the lapels of his tuxedo. When they finally broke apart, Whitfield had disappeared. So either pretense. In the car, ride home, silence stretched between them like a living thing. That was convincing, she finally said, voice barely audible above the engine's purr. His knuckles whitened against the steering wheel. Too convincing, he replied, and neither looked at the other for the remainder of the drive. When was the last time a kiss completely changed your perception of someone? Share your story in the comments. Back at the mansion, they separated to opposite wings without discussion. Aaliyah touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the ghost of his mouth against hers, the unexpected heat that had flared between them. The kiss had been for show, a tactical response to Whitfield's insinuations. So why couldn't she stop replaying it? And why, when she closed her eyes, did she imagine what might have happened if there had been no audience at all? The blizzard trapped them inside for 3 days. Ice outside, fire building within, and nowhere to hide from truths neither wanted to face. Weather alerts had warned of the approaching storm, but none had predicted its ferocity. Snow piled in drifts against windows. Wind howled through bare tree branches, and Connecticut disappeared beneath a blanket of white that erased roads, boundaries, and excuses for distance. On the first night, the power went out. Generators should kick in, Michael said, passing Aaliyah a flashlight as they stood in the darkened kitchen. The lights remained off. The backup system had failed. Main house circuits damaged, he reported after checking the basement. We'll need to conserve heat until repairs can be made. Staff can't get through the roads. Aaliyah found him in the library an hour later, building a fire in the massive stone hearth. Flames cast his profile in gold and shadow, highlighting the concentration in his brow as he arranged logs with unexpected skill. I thought billionaires hired people for this, she said, wrapping a blanket tighter around her shoulders. Something resembling a smile touched his lips. I grew up camping with my grandfather, before my mother died. Another piece of the puzzle that was Michael Hawthorne. Not just sharp suits and shareholder meetings, but dirt under fingernails and nights under stars. As darkness settled around the mansion, they gravitated to the warmth of the library. Hours passed in unexpected conversation. His childhood summers in Maine, her struggles through nursing school, books they both read, dreams neither had shared before. Firelight painted gold across the library's dark wood and leather, casting their shadows large against bookshelves. Two separate silhouettes slowly merging into one as night deepened. You're shivering, he observed as the fire began to die. I'm fine. You're cold. He moved beside her on the leather sofa, hesitating only briefly before lifting the blanket and sliding beneath it. The heat of his body radiated through the thin cotton of her sweater. "Better?" he asked, voice dropping to a register she hadn't heard before. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Minutes passed, the crackling fire the only sound beyond their breathing. His arms settled around her shoulders, drawing her closer under the pretense of sharing warmth. Her head found the hollow of his shoulder, as if it belonged there. By the second night, pretenses had worn thin. When their hands brushed passing a bottle of wine, neither pulled away. When she tucked her feet beneath his thigh for warmth, his hand settled naturally on her ankle, thumb tracing absent circles against her skin. On the third night, everything changed. His fingers traced her collarbone as if memorizing terrain previously forbidden, eyes asking permission his voice couldn't formulate. "Yes," she whispered, answering the unasked question hanging between them like smoke. Each layer removed revealed more than skin. Vulnerability, hunger, the silent admission that this had stopped being pretend somewhere between contract and kiss. "Are you sure?" he asked, hovering above her on the blankets they'd spread before the fire. "No rules tonight," she answered, pulling him down to her. "What happens when pretending becomes real? When lines you drew start to blur? Tell me below if you've crossed boundaries you swore you never would." Dawn broke through clouds as they lay tangled in sheets before the dying fire. His phone chimed with a message that made his body tense against hers. "The family trustees want to meet you," he said, voice returning to the businessman she first met. "They're questioning the validity of our marriage." The trustees circled her like sharks scenting blood, their questions barbed hooks designed to tear apart a lie she was no longer sure was entirely false. Manhattan gleamed below them through floor-to-ceiling windows, 40 stories of glass and steel separating them from a city that felt close enough to touch yet impossibly distant. Much like the man who now stood beside her chair, hand resting possessively on her shoulder. "Tell us how you met," prompted Elizabeth Hawthorne, Michael's aunt and head trustee, her silver hair styled in a severe bob that matched her expression. Aaliyah recited the story they'd rehearsed. The hospital gala, their connection over healthcare initiatives, his surprising proposal after a whirlwind romance. The words flowed easily after weeks of repetition, yet landed differently now that she knew the taste of his skin, the weight of his body over hers. Interesting, Elizabeth's smile didn't reach her eyes. "And your background is in community nursing?" "Emergency medicine, with a focus on underserved populations." "Noble," said another trustee, a man whose name she'd already forgotten. Though quite a leap from Michael's usual companions. Heat crept up her neck. With each question, their strategy became clear. Highlight the gap between their worlds, expose the improbability of their union, prove the marriage a sham. They weren't wrong, but they weren't entirely right either. "What attracted you to my nephew?" Elizabeth leaned forward, eyes sharp. Besides the obvious financial advantages, Michael's grip tightened on her shoulder. Before he could intervene, Aaliyah met the older woman's gaze directly. "His loneliness," she answered truthfully. "The way he pretends it isn't there." Something flashed in Elizabeth's eyes, surprise, perhaps recognition. "And the way he looks at problems," Aaliyah continued. "Not as obstacles, but as puzzles waiting for solutions. He sees potential where others see impossibilities." The room fell silent. She felt Michael's thumb brush against her collarbone, a gesture of surprise, of gratitude. As his uncle asked about their courtship, her mind betrayed her, replaying the way Michael's teeth had grazed her inner thigh during those 3 snowbound nights. How his eyes had held hers as he moved above her, neither of them pretending any longer. "Well," Elizabeth finally said, gathering her papers, "the board will make its determination regarding the trust distribution by the end of the month." As the elevator doors closed behind them, leaving the trustees and their suspicions on the 40th floor, he pulled her against his chest. "You were brilliant," he murmured against her hair. She pushed away gently, eyes searching his. "I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending," she admitted. "Have you ever had to defend something real that began as a lie? How did you navigate that impossible line? Drop your thoughts below." What she didn't say was which part had become the pretense. The marriage, or the claim that her heart wasn't involved. Because somewhere between contract and connection, between performance and passion, the lines had blurred beyond recognition, and the thought terrified her more than any board of trustees ever could. She brought him to Oakland like bringing a wolf into a hen house. Her childhood neighborhood watching with narrowed eyes as a billionaire tried to fit at her mother's scratched kitchen table. Christmas lights strung across chain-link fences glowed against December darkness, casting multicolored shadows across faces gathered on her mother's porch. Faces that held histories Michael's money couldn't buy and experiences his privilege couldn't comprehend. "You didn't have to come," she reminded him as they approached the modest two-bedroom home. "I wanted to meet her." His voice betrayed no uncertainty, though his knuckles whitened around the gift bag he carried. Viola Brooks answered the door with the quiet dignity Aaliyah had inherited, her eyes taking in Michael's expensive coat and nervous smile before pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. "So this is the man who stole my baby," she said, extending her hand. "It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Brooks." Michael's corporate confidence vanished, replaced by genuine respect that surprised Aaliyah. Inside, neighbors and family crowded the small living room for Viola's annual Christmas gathering. Aunties assessed Michael with unconcealed curiosity. Cousins whispered behind plastic cups of punch. Children stared openly at the stranger in their midst. He stood out like a diamond in gravel. Designer shoes on worn carpet, Swiss watch catching light beneath the plastic mistletoe, shoulders too broad for the cramped space. Yet instead of shrinking from their scrutiny, he leaned into it, asking questions about family photos, accepting second helpings of Aunt Jeannie's mac and cheese, listening intently to Uncle Ray's stories about Oakland before gentrification. In the kitchen, helping her mother with dishes, Aaliyah caught snippets of conversation from the living room. Michael discussing community investment with her cousin Marcus, who ran a youth center downtown. "Your husband's different than I expected," her mother said, passing her a plate to dry. "Different how?" "He looks at you the way your father used to look at me." Viola's eyes, wise and knowing, held her daughter's. "Like you're the answer to questions he's been asking his whole life." Heat crept up Aaliyah's neck. "It's complicated, Mama. Love always is, baby." Later, squeezed in her childhood bedroom while her mother prepared the pull-out couch, Michael's eyes took in the faded posters, the nursing school diploma, the life she'd built before him. "Your family's amazing," he said, fingers brushing a framed photo of teenage Aaliyah with her debate team. "They're skeptical of you, as they should be." His honesty surprised her. "I haven't earned their trust yet." The word, yet, hung between them, full of future possibilities neither had planned for. When have your worlds collided? When has someone from one part of your life stepped into another? How did you handle that transition? His mouth found hers in the darkness, hot against her neck as she pressed fingers to his lips, warning silence while family voices carried through thin walls. The forbidden nature of the moment, stealing passion in her childhood bed, sent electricity crackling through her veins. As they drove away the next morning, her mother's blessings still warm in their ears, he reached for her hand across the console. "I want to show you something when we get home," he said. The word home hung between them. No longer his mansion, but suddenly, impossibly, theirs. He unlocked the door he'd kept closed since her arrival, revealing not skeletons or secrets, but dreams drawn in blue ink that included spaces meant for two. The room, tucked away in the west wing, had always been off-limits, the only area of the mansion where even Mrs. Porter wasn't permitted to clean. Aaliyah had wondered what he kept behind that heavy oak door. Financial documents, perhaps, or mementos of past relationships. She never expected this. Blueprints covered the walls, meticulous drawings of a house by the ocean, smaller than the mansion, but infinitely more intimate, with notes in his precise handwriting marking spaces. A's garden, shared study, nursery maybe. "What is this?" she asked, fingers hovering over the careful lettering that spelled her initial. Michael stood behind her, close enough that she felt his warmth, but not quite touching. "I've owned land on the Maine coast for years, where my grandfather taught me to fish." "You're building a house." "I'm planning a home," he corrected softly. There's a difference. She turned to face him, heart pounding against her ribs. When did you add my initial? After the snowstorm. His admission hung in the air between them. Before the trustees' meeting, the timeline shifted everything she thought she understood about their arrangement. This wasn't part of their contract. This wasn't for show. Why are you showing me this now? Because I'm tired of pretending. His hands found her waist, drawing her closer. The contract brought you into my life, but it's not why I want you to stay. Her breath caught. Michael, I'm not asking for promises, he continued. I'm just showing you possibilities. She looked again at the blueprints. The garden with southern exposure because she once mentioned loving morning sun. The kitchen with the island she'd admired in a magazine, left open on the coffee table. The master bathroom with the soaking tub she'd confessed to dreaming about during nursing school. He'd been listening. All this time, he'd been paying attention. Her lips found his with newfound hunger, backing him against the drafting table. Blueprints crinkled beneath her as he lifted her onto the polished surface, his mouth trailing fire down her throat. Clothes fell away, discarded among architectural dreams and possibilities. Are you sure? He whispered against her collarbone. In answer, she pulled him closer, wrapping her legs around his waist. His name escaped her lips like a prayer as they moved together among sketches of their possible future, his body driving into hers with an intensity that spoke of more than physical desire, of recognition, of belonging. What's the most vulnerable someone has ever been with you? The moment they showed you their true dreams? Share your experience. Afterward, as moonlight spilled across discarded clothes and rumpled blueprints, his phone lit up with an incoming email. The preview notification glowed in the darkness. Investigation of Aaliyah Brooks. Results enclosed. His body tensed against hers. He'd seen it too. What investigation? She asked, cold dread replacing the warmth that had suffused her moments before. I didn't. He reached for the phone, opening the message with fingers that weren't quite steady. Attached was a file containing photographs. Aaliyah meeting with James Whitfield 3 years ago at a medical conference, long before she'd ever heard the name Michael Hawthorne. You know him, Michael said, voice hollow. You lied. The email arrived like a missile, precision targeted to destroy everything they'd built beyond the boundaries of their contract. His home office transformed into a courtroom, winter moonlight casting shadows that divided the floor between them like a line neither dared cross. Prosecutor and defendant where lovers had stood hours before. Explain. Michael stood with his back to the window, face in shadow, only the rigid set of his shoulders betraying his emotion. Yes, I met Whitfield at a healthcare conference in Chicago. 3 years ago, Aaliyah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold in the overheated room. He was funding a research project on community health outcomes. I was presenting data from Oakland. And you didn't think to mention this when he approached us at the gala? It was a 10-minute conversation in a room with hundreds of people. I barely remembered him. The photographs on his tablet told a different story. Aaliyah smiling up at Whitfield, accepting a business card, looking engaged in conversation. Innocent moments frozen in time, now weaponized to suggest conspiracy. He's my biggest competitor. Michael's voice remained dangerously calm. The timing is convenient. Convenient? Heat flooded her face. You think I engineered this? That I somehow orchestrated meeting you? The email suggests you approached me deliberately, knowing about the trust conditions. That's ridiculous. I didn't even know who you were when we met. But doubt had taken root. She saw it in the way he held himself apart from her, in the calculated distance he maintained. Did you know who I was before we met? He demanded, voice hollow. Did you plan this from the beginning? The question sliced deeper than she expected, paper cuts that bled more than they should. How dare you? Her voice trembled. I've shared your bed. I've met your family. I defended our marriage to your trustees. Our arrangement, he corrected coldly. Let's not confuse terms. She flinched as if struck. Arrangement, of course. How could I forget the contract? The contract that pays you $5 million. Is that what you think this is about? Money. She stepped closer, fury propelling her forward. I'll let you into my mother's home. I introduced you to the people I love. I showed you parts of myself I've never shown anyone. Perhaps you're a better actress than I realized. His fingers grazed her tear-stained cheek before dropping to his side, desire warring with doubt in his eyes. For a moment, she thought he might pull her into his arms, might choose trust over suspicion. Instead, he turned away, creating distance where there had been none. I'll have my team investigate the source of these photos. Investigate me, you mean? The truth crystallized with painful clarity. You already are, aren't you? That's why my name is in the subject line. You've been checking up on me all along. His silence confirmed her suspicion. She moved to his desk, where her wedding ring caught moonlight through the window. With steady fingers, she removed it, placing it on the polished surface. The diamond caught light one final time. Check my bank accounts, she said, voice breaking. I never touched your money. Not once. The door closed behind her with a quiet click, more devastating than any slam. Why have you been falsely accused? How does it feel when someone you care about doubts your intentions? Tell me in the comments. In her suite, she packed quickly, mechanically, tears blurring her vision as she folded clothes she hadn't owned before him. The contract lay open on her nightstand. Page 3, paragraph 4. Either party may terminate the agreement in cases of deliberate deception. How fitting that their relationship would end the way it began. With a legal clause, with suspicion, with hearts hidden behind walls of self-protection, and with a truth neither was ready to acknowledge, that somewhere along the way, the arrangement had become something the contract never accounted for. She stood in pouring Atlanta rain, designer suitcase at her feet. The same feet that had walked into his life with a contract and were now walking out with a broken heart no clause had protected. The penthouse loomed behind her, top floor of the Hawthorne Atlanta building, where they'd flown that morning for what should have been a simple business meeting. Now, it was the stage for their public ending, with paparazzi gathered behind hotel barricades across the street, tipped off by an anonymous source. Lightning split the Georgia sky as cameras flashed from behind barricades. The perfect storm of natural drama and manufactured spectacle, her white dress turning transparent in rain that couldn't wash away the words he'd hurled like weapons. Is this what you wanted? Michael appeared in the doorway behind her, voice carrying above the downpour. A public scene? More ammunition for whatever game you're playing. I'm not playing anything. She didn't turn to face him. I'm leaving. Like you asked. In front of cameras? How convenient. I didn't call them. He stepped closer, rain immediately darkening his suit. 3 more weeks, and you'd have gotten the final payment. Was exposing me worth losing millions? The accusation cut deeper than he knew. She whirled to face him, no longer caring that tears mixed with raindrops on her cheeks. I never wanted your money. I wanted... She caught herself before admitting what she'd only recently acknowledged. I wanted you to trust me. Trust is earned. I thought I had earned it. His jaw tightened, doubt and desire warring in his eyes. Behind him, she glimpsed Mrs. Porter in the doorway, face drawn with concern. The housekeeper had become a friend over these months, another casualty of whatever was ending here. Aaliyah turned away, scanning the street for the taxi she'd called. Cameras clicked in the distance, capturing her humiliation for tomorrow's headlines. You were a business deal, he announced loudly enough for hovering reporters to hear. Nothing more. The lie hung between them, a shield he wielded to protect himself from truths neither was ready to voice. She'd almost reached the curb when his hand caught her wrist, spinning her back toward him. Rain pelted them both as he searched her face. Tell me it isn't true, he said, voice low and urgent. Tell me you didn't know about the trust requirements before we met. Would you believe me if I did? Instead of answering, he pulled her against him, his mouth finding hers with desperate intensity. His hands gripped her face with possessive urgency that contradicted every cruel word, lips claiming hers with angry passion that tasted of goodbye. For one heartbeat, she allowed herself to respond, to pour everything she couldn't say into this final moment of connection. Then she pushed him away. Let me go, Michael. The taxi pulled up, offering escape. She gathered her suitcase, dignity wrapped around her like armor. You'll get what the contract promised, he called after her, retreating behind business when emotion became too dangerous. My lawyers will contact yours. Have you ever had to walk away, even when every cell in your body wanted to stay? Share your story of the hardest goodbye. The taxi pulled away, her reflection shrinking in his view until rain swallowed her completely. Only then did he notice the small white pharmacy bag that had fallen from her purse during their struggle, its contents spilling across wet pavement. Prenatal vitamins prescribed last week. He secured his billion-dollar trust the same day he discovered the pregnancy test hidden in her abandoned nightstand. 2 blue lines that changed everything about a game he'd already lost. The boardroom erupted in applause as trustees signed the final documents. Champagne corks popping while his mind replayed her standing in the rain. Each drop on her face now recast in his memory as tears he'd been too blind to recognize. Congratulations, Michael. Elizabeth approached, champagne flute extended. The Hawthorne Trust remained secure for another generation. He accepted the glass automatically, not tasting the expensive bubbles. Thank you, Aunt Elizabeth. I must admit, I had my doubts about your arrangement. She lowered her voice. Where's your wife today? Indisposed. The lie came easily. Easier than admitting he'd thrown her into the rain. Accused her of conspiracy. Destroyed whatever had grown between them beyond the boundaries of their contract. His phone buzzed with stock notifications. Hawthorne shares had dropped 8% since photos of their Atlanta confrontation hit the internet. Investors hated scandal, and scandal followed betrayal like sharks after blood. Later, alone in the Connecticut mansion that now echoed with absence, he wandered into her suite. Mrs. Porter had left it untouched, sheets still rumpled from the last night they'd spent together, her scent lingering on pillowcases, closet half empty where she'd packed in haste. The pregnancy test lay in the back of her nightstand drawer, hidden beneath a notebook. 2 blue lines, unmistakable. Next to it, a doctor's appointment card dated 3 days before their fight. Dreams of her left him waking alone, sheets twisted around his legs, her phantom touch dissolving into dawn, desire melting into grief. The emptiness beside him mocked what he'd thrown away. When the private investigator called 2 weeks later, Michael was reviewing acquisition paperwork in his Manhattan office, mechanical actions to fill days that felt increasingly meaningless. I traced the email, Mr. Hawthorne. The man's voice crackled through the speakerphone. It came from an account registered to Vanessa Creighton, his ex-fiancée, the woman he'd broken up with a year before meeting Aaliyah. I have surveillance footage from the Riverside Club Gala showing Ms. Creighton photographing you and Mrs. Hawthorne. She later manipulated those images to create the suggestion of a prior relationship with James Whitfield. Ice spread through his veins. You're certain? Beyond doubt, sir. There's no evidence Mrs. Hawthorne had any prior connection to Whitfield beyond the conference mentioned in her statement. No communication, no financial transactions, nothing to suggest conspiracy. He'd accused her without evidence, doubted her without reason. Let his past experiences color his judgment until he couldn't recognize truth from fear. When have you realized too late that you made a terrible mistake? What did you do to fix it? I want to know your story. He stood in her empty Oakland apartment, key from her mother heavy in his palm. Neighbors said she'd left weeks ago. No forwarding address, no social media, vanished like she'd never existed. On the bare mattress lay a sonogram image with a post-it note. We never needed your money. We needed you. He abandoned boardrooms for bus stations, traded tailored suits for rental cars, and left million-dollar deals unsigned, all to find the woman carrying his child and the heart he'd foolishly returned. Interstate highways blurred outside rental car windows, neon motel signs his only constellations for 3 months of searching. His once meticulously trimmed beard now growing wild as the hope that somehow, somewhere, she might forgive him. The board called emergency meetings. Stock prices plummeted. Business publications speculated about his mental state. Michael Hawthorne, they wrote, had disappeared from the corporate world without explanation, leaving trillion-dollar negotiations in limbo. He didn't care. Viola Brooks refused to help at first, door firmly closed against the man who had hurt her daughter. She trusted you, Viola said through the screen door of her Oakland home. Do you know how rare that is for her? I made a mistake. The words felt inadequate even as he spoke them. Please, she's carrying my child. A child you accused her of using as a trap. The truth stung worse coming from her mother's mouth. I was wrong. About everything. Viola studied him. The shadows beneath his eyes, the rumpled clothes, the desperation etched into his face. She doesn't want to be found. I understand that. But our child deserves more than my absence. After long consideration, Viola offered a single crumb. She has family in Georgia. Georgia became Louisiana, became Tennessee, became Kentucky. Distant cousins, old nursing school friends, former colleagues, each providing fragments of information that led to dead ends and fresh starts. He sold shares in his company to fund the search, liquidated assets, stepped away from deals years in the making. His wealth had never felt more worthless than when it failed to bring him closer to her. In Louisville, he discovered her scarf in a donation bin, burying his face in familiar fabric that still held traces of her perfume, body responding with painful longing to even this ghost of her presence. A volunteer mentioned a pregnant woman matching Aaliyah's description had been coming to the free clinic for prenatal vitamins. She's struggling, the volunteer confided, too proud to use insurance that might lead back to her ex. The image of Aaliyah refusing his money even now, pregnant and alone, broke something in his chest. He doubled his efforts, abandoning private jets for Greyhound buses that might have carried her, sleeping in roadside motels where she might have rested. On day 97, a nurse at an Oakland community clinic hesitated when he showed Aaliyah's picture, recognition flickering across her face. She's not supposed to be here until tomorrow, she said before catching herself. His heart stopped, then raced. After 97 days of searching, he was 24 hours from finding her. What would you cross states to find? What would you turn your life upside down for? Share what makes someone worth chasing to the ends of the earth. He spent the night in his car outside the clinic, afraid to check into a hotel and miss her, afraid to blink and lose this chance. Dawn broke over Oakland, painting the clinic's brick facade in golden light that felt like promise, like possibility, like the second chance he didn't deserve but desperately needed. 23 hours to go. 22. 21. He rehearsed words, then discarded them as inadequate. What could he possibly say to undo the damage? What words could rebuild trust shattered by doubt? She walked into the prenatal clinic with one hand cradling her swollen belly, only to find him occupying the chair beside the one with her name on it. 5 months of silence collapsed into 5 feet of space neither knew how to cross. Aaliyah froze in the doorway, one hand protectively covering her 7-month bump, the other gripping her medical file with white knuckles. Her hair had grown longer, dark curls framing a face both familiar and changed. Her eyes, locked on his, reflected shock, wariness, and something he couldn't name. Michael stood slowly, as if approaching a wild animal that might bolt. The waiting room's mint green walls and outdated magazines created a mundane backdrop for the extraordinary, a billionaire on his knees before a nurse practitioner, tears tracking unchecked down his face while other patients pretended not to stare. How did you find me? Her voice was steady, revealing nothing. I never stopped looking. The beard he'd grown during his search itched against his collar. May I sit with you? She hesitated, then nodded once, lowering herself carefully into a plastic chair. He took the one beside her, maintaining distance she'd enforced with her silence. You look beautiful, he said softly. I look pregnant. Yes. A nurse called someone else's name, momentarily drawing attention away from the tension crackling between them. I received the results of the investigation, he began. Vanessa sent those photos. She manipulated them to suggest. I know, Aaliyah cut him off. Your investigator found me 2 months ago. He explained everything. Surprise must have shown on his face because she added, I asked him not to tell you where I was. The knowledge that she deliberately remained hidden stung, though he had no right to feel wounded. What? Because I needed to decide if I wanted you in our lives. One hand stroked her belly absently. If I could trust you again. And have you decided? I'm still here, aren't I? Hope fluttered in his chest, fragile as tissue paper. Aaliyah, I don't expect forgiveness, he said, voice raw. I just need you to know that I love you. Contract or no contract, baby or no baby. The money means nothing. You mean everything." The words hung between them, naked and vulnerable. She studied his face, searching for deception or manipulation, finding only the stripped-down honesty of a man with nothing left to lose. "You accused me of trapping you. I was afraid." "Of what?" "Of how much I needed you." The admission cost him everything. "No one has ever mattered to me the way you do." It terrified me. Her expression softened slightly. "Fear makes people cruel." "It made me stupid," he corrected. "I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too scared to believe it could be real." His hand accidentally brushed her stomach during his explanation, the baby kicking against his palm like a Morse code message. "We're here, we're real, we're waiting." Aaliyah didn't pull away. "I sold the Connecticut house," he told her, "and most of my company's shares." "Why?" "To build the home in Maine. The one from the blueprints." He swallowed hard. "It's almost finished. Whether you come with me or not, it's yours. Both of you. What's your price for forgiveness? What would someone have to do to earn back your trust after betrayal? Tell me in the comments what redemption looks like to you." The ultrasound technician called her name, breaking the tension between them. "He can come too," the tech offered when she hesitated in the doorway. 7 months pregnant, she turned to the father of her child, the man who had thrown her into the rain and then crossed states to find her. "It's up to you," she said, extending her hand, the choice hanging between them like their future. They exchanged vows a second time on the beach behind their new home. No contracts, no witnesses except the setting sun and the daughter nestled safely between their heartbeats. Waves kissed the shore in rhythmic devotion as fog rolled gently across sand still warm from afternoon sun. Nature's own witnesses to promises spoken not for trustees or tabloids, but solely for each other. The house stood behind them, smaller than the Connecticut mansion, but infinitely more like home. Windows faced the ocean, just as he'd drawn in those blueprints months ago. The garden plot waited for spring planting. The nursery, painted soft yellow with handcrafted stars across the ceiling, held a crib built by his own hands during months of her cautious forgiveness. Rebuilding trust had taken time. After the clinic, she'd agreed to visit the main property, arriving with boundaries firm as the coastal rocks. Separate bedrooms, clear communication, no assumptions. He'd respected every line she drew, grateful even for her anger because it meant she cared enough to feel betrayed. Each day, he proved himself through consistency rather than grand gestures, attending every doctor's appointment, cooking meals when morning sickness returned her third trimester, reading parenting books aloud as they sat on opposite ends of the porch swing. Slowly, the distance between them on that swing decreased. When their daughter arrived in a rush of summer storm and midnight contractions, Michael held Aaliyah's hand through 18 hours of labor, whispering encouragement as she brought new life into the world. Little Zora Brooks Hawthorne entered with her mother's determination and her father's blue eyes, tiny fingers gripping Michael's thumb with surprising strength. "She knows you," Aaliyah had whispered, exhausted and radiant in the hospital bed. "She's perfect," he'd replied, voice breaking, like her mother. That night, watching Aaliyah nurse their daughter in the soft glow of hospital lights, he placed a small box on her nightstand. Inside lay not a diamond, but a simple gold band, unadorned and honest. "I choose you," he vowed, voice steady as he placed the simple band on her finger 3 months later on their private beach. "Not for what you give me, but for who we become together." Zora cooed in her carrier, Pacific Waves providing soundtrack to promises that needed no legal documentation. This time, there were no terms or conditions, only true strip bare by experience and choice. That evening, with their daughter asleep in her nursery, moonlight silvered their skin as they rediscovered each other, his lips tracing the new landscape of her post-pregnancy body with reverent attention, her hands reclaiming territory once contractually forbidden, now freely given. He worshipped each stretch mark with tender devotion, his touch erasing months of separation with patient persistence until pleasure rebuilt the trust words alone couldn't restore. Their bodies remembered what pride and fear had briefly stolen. the language they'd created between contract clauses and painful goodbyes. Have you ever had to rebuild something that was broken? What does it take to transform a business arrangement into love? Share your thoughts on what makes a relationship real. If this journey from contract to true connection touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that explore how love finds us in the most unexpected arrangements. Tell me in the comments whether you would have forgiven him or walked away forever. And remember, sometimes the papers we sign are just the beginning of the story we're meant to live.